Great Yorkshire Business on Great Yorkshire Radio.
We're talking about today something that businesses might not have, some things that they don't have, but maybe they should really think about. I'm sat down today with Peter Gibson from Cole Solicitors, and we are talking wills. Good morning, Peter.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
I'm very well indeed on this wet morning as I arrive drenched, but we're drying off now.
It's miserable out there, isn't it?
It's miserable. So Peter, let's just expand on this wills theme then with businesses, because I've talked to a fair few businesses, and I know you do, and there's a lot out there that don't really think about the future. So tell us about wills and what they should be thinking about.
Well, I think anybody who has any assets at all really should be preparing a will. But particularly if you are a business owner, be it as a shareholder in a limited company, company director, or even as a sole trader, you've got responsibilities that need to be able to be dealt with if that catastrophic event has happened. And putting some terms in your will to deal with how your business can continue after you have passed away is something that business owners really should be thinking about doing and putting in place.
Is it then when people are actually thinking about starting a business, they look at the nice glossy bits, right? Getting going, the marketing, the promotion, the sales, but then don't really think about enough around that. Let's call it an exit strategy for one. Sure. Not selling it, but yeah. If that sounds a bit hard, doesn't it? Yeah. But you know what I mean. They don't think about that. So when you talk to businesses and things like that, do you come up? What kind of things do you come across? Somebody may die in the company. Where they're going to leave it to? Is it their wife? Is it the partner? There's things that they need to think about.
Well, these are all things that businesses should be considering, and they should be considering it on a regular basis. Every business can spend more money on advertising, marketing, recruiting more staff, better premises, etc. There's always demands on a business to spend more on other things. But if you can get some of these really important legal documents in place at a very early stage, then you have got that peace of mind and know that if something catastrophic happens, that things can continue. I think people owe it to their business, and they particularly owe it to their employees and to their families to make sure that these things are properly taken care of.
So, do you think some people assume that they may have a partner or their wives involved in the business, that when something happens to them, something automatically goes one way? Is that...
There's a lot of
assumptions.
Yeah, there's a lot of assumptions made out there, and a lot of them are incorrect. For example, if you are a director of a limited company and you've got all the shares, if you don't make provision in your will, and if you haven't got a shareholders agreement in place, it's not necessarily clear-cut where those shares are going to go. Now, you could end up in a situation where those shares, by default, in the absence of a will, are automatically going to go to your spouse or partner. Is that what you want to happen? Is your spouse or partner the right person to be able to deal with that business going forward after you've died? Bearing in mind that person is going to be suffering with the grief and the loss of you. Do they need the headache of dealing with a company, business that they perhaps have not had any involvement in, don't know anything about? Is that the right thing?
I guess probably not. I was just thinking that, I've no knowledge of the business.
Sure.
And there it's landed on their doorstep, and it's like, oh my word, what do I do? Sure. So as a group of directors, they need to sit down and think about this, about how they're going to work.
If I just look at my own personal example as a director and a shareholder in a law firm, my will actually makes some special provisions, appointing some special people. We call them special executors. And those people have been specifically chosen because of their skills and talents and expertise to be able to take on my shareholding and look after it until such time as decisions can be made about the business. I owe it to my business, I owe it to my employees, and I owe it to my family to have done that and put that in place. And I think lots of people put off writing a will in the first instance because they don't know what to do, they don't know what to put in it, they don't want to contemplate their demise. Nobody likes to think about the fact that they are one day going to die. But like taxes, it's inevitable.
We are, yes.
And it's important to think about those things. And sitting down with a lawyer, it needn't be complex. It needn't even be expensive. And just chat through your options helps to crystallise people's minds and helps them formulate a plan for putting together a document that can make sure that things are properly taken care of.
You just pricked something in my mind there in terms of nobody wants to contemplate that. But when you think about that, what's the situation is you don't contemplate it, but what kind of things do you leave behind if you don't?
Problems, headaches, difficulties. And, people talk about planning their funeral and saying, well, I want this type of service, I do or I don't want flowers, I don't want a wake, etc. But far more important is dealing with a business that you've actually got, that you've got responsibilities and ownership of, to make sure that can either be sold or dealt with or passed on in the way that you see fit.
And Pete, this is the worst case scenario if they don't have something like that. Could the business fold?
Yes.
Right, okay. Simple answer. Yes, it's gone.
It could.
Yeah, so everything that they've worked for disappears.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
If depending on the size of the business and how many people are in it, but if we're talking about a very small business, it may not be able to continue to run.
Right, okay.
Who's going to deal with the bank? Who's going to deal with payments in, out, wages, etc.? Who's going to deal with those things in the event that something happens? And putting some plans in place, just even talking about them. We call it internally disaster planning, and it's not about fire insurance, buildings insurance, water damage, computer fraud, cyber attacks. For us, disaster planning is disaster planning for that disaster of death, disaster of catastrophic event, stroke, heart attack, onset of Alzheimer's, dementia, etc. And we can deal with that by putting powers of attorney in place for business owners.
And do you know what? I was just going to mention that because there's one about death.
Yes.
Right. Which, forgive me, is it's death. It's done. Right.
Well, it's the most
catastrophic. But in terms of what happens if somebody gets injured, has a stroke or things like that, and they're incapable of making decisions or whatever, or running their business, that's where the lasting power of attorney comes in?
That's quite correct. They can actually be even more important than wills, because if you are still alive but incapable of taking decisions, acting, and you've still got these ownership and responsibility issues, you perhaps still need income. You perhaps still need money coming into the house to pay the bills. And if your business falls, the likelihood of that happening, if you haven't got specific insurance in place for that, is even more catastrophic, because you're still alive. You're still in the picture. And putting powers of attorney in place for businesses, particularly if you've got employees, is a very important thing to do. We're increasingly seeing people doing it and considering doing it and making sure that it's happened, but there are still thousands and thousands of businesses out there who haven't put it in place.
I've just got a thought there as well, because I'm thinking of, relatively small business, and you're the person, I know, do we still sign cheques? I guess we do, that we sign documents, and maybe you might be the only signatory.
Absolutely.
And if you can't do that, what happens to the business? What's the complication of that?
Well, just imagine that there is nobody to sign the cheque to pay the staff's wages at the end of the month. How is that business going to manage and survive? Are the staff going to still turn up to work? Will customers still be serviced?
Right. Yeah, just that one simple thing.
Absolutely.
That has massive knock-on effects. And I don't know, but I would guess that trying to sort that out without a power of attorney and sort out with the banks and stuff can be a bit of a challenge without having that document.
Well,
say no more.
We know how hard it is to contact any institution on behalf of somebody else.
Yes. Yeah.
We've all tried to ring up on behalf of an elderly relative and speak to the gas company who sent a wrong bill, or to speak to a telephone company, etc. Can you imagine trying to have that conversation with a business manager at a bank for somebody who has not able to act?
Yeah. So some interesting things to contemplate, Peter, some interesting things to think about if you're in business. Now, the great news is, right, it doesn't matter what happens in business, there's always help and support there.
Absolutely.
You've only got to ask, haven't you?
Yeah, I think sometimes people are afraid to ask because they don't want to appear as though they're daft or stupid. There's no such thing as a stupid question. If you don't know the answer to something, ask the question. And there are a myriad of people out there who can provide help, support, advice and guidance in these situations and circumstances, be it your accountant, be it us as a firm of lawyers. There's all sorts of help out there. You just have to plan for it and make sure that you don't have to rely on it.
Yeah, okay. So if people want to come and have that conversation with you, as I call that lovely cappuccino moment, yes, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, they can always get in touch with us through our website, www.coles-law.co.uk. Our telephone number, 0800 160 1010. We're on social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn.
Okay, you're all over social media.
We are indeed, yes.
Okay,
yes.
Brilliant. So there you are. Pete, thanks for talking to us today.
Always a pleasure.
Okay.
Great Yorkshire Business on Great Yorkshire Radio.